Perhaps someday we will unravel every horrifying mystery that lies at the heart of the cradle of civilization. But for now, we're plunging deeper and deeper into shocking discoveries, and experts are rethinking the course of evolution. What has been found in Africa turns upside down all our previous knowledge and ideas about our world, its past and future, from alien rocks to skeletons, or vice versa. Intrigued? Then join us. On the TopFacts channel, we'll show you 11 frighteningly large-scale discoveries made in African deserts. Scientists and archaeologists were extremely puzzled by a blue-colored stone found in the state of Sierra Leone in West Africa, on the coast of the Atlantic Ocean. In 1990, Italian geologist Angelo Pittoni came across the unusual stones when he was excavating. He had never seen such a matte blue stone in African soil, although he had studied all local minerals well. The locals told such a legend about the origin of the find. The heavenly stones were actually cursed creatures who once lived with the gods in heaven, and as punishment for their misdeeds, they were turned into stones and banished from heaven to stay on earth forever. Some confusing story. Pittoni wanted scientific data. He sent the stones to laboratories around the world. Samples showed that the blue stones had a special chemical composition completely unknown before, and the stone was then called the heavenly stone, despite its belonging to Earth. The composition of the stone has sparked many debates and theories, one of which suggests that it's the fragments of a meteor that hit the Earth. It probably happened so long ago that even the crater weathered, and the fragments of the meteor were deep in the folds of the Earth's crust. Also, very strange seems the color of this stone. It does not look like a mineral known to us, for example, lapis lazuli. Its composition has nothing to do with terrestrial fossils, and it is believed to be of external origin. Believe it or not, Africa is splitting in two, and this split is something truly extraordinary, and it's scary to think what will happen next. However, splitting a continent does not mean that the landmass will be split in two, although, in fact, that is exactly what is happening here. It is more likely that a new ocean will emerge from the cracks of Africa. Of course, this process will be gradual and take millions of years, but the splitting of the landmass means that we will have a sixth ocean on planet Earth, a phenomenon that will change the geology of the continent forever. In 2005, a 35-mile-long crack had already formed in the Ethiopian desert. Africa is part of the East African rift of the Earth's crust, and the African plate has always been splitting. We already knew that. But a new crack in the Ethiopian desert suggests that the split is not as gradual as we thought. This is alarming, as it is horrifying to speculate about the future. One thing is clear: it is inevitable. This split will actually place the ocean between the two new plates, and previously landlocked countries like Ethiopia and Uganda will have their own coastline, a phenomenon that will possibly boost their economies and create a connection to the world. The potential to become a small continent in its own right has the potential for conflict, but hopefully it's still a long way off, and a frightening split won't bring anything malignant. Namibia is home to a real mirage, and let's just say it is one of the creepiest and most pessimistic spectacles in Africa. Ironically, the Skeleton Coast in Namibia is very popular and is a special attention zone. It is a wide coastline, and its most interesting feature is the sand dunes that rise up behind it. The coast is inhabited, but it is also a huge open graveyard. For miles and miles, there are skeletons of wild animals such as lions, hyenas, and other predators scattered there. The shoreline is just piles of white sand. You'd think we were in the Caribbean Sea, but these creepy skeletons definitely lead us to believe that this is not a resort, but indeed some kind of dead man's cove. In addition to the skeletons, you'll also find hundreds of ships that were either abandoned or wrecked near the shore. And for centuries, this abandoned beach has been a grave for mighty ships that once sailed proudly on the rough waters of the ocean. One can only guess what became of those people who were on board. Every now and then, Africa proves to us why it is actually considered the cradle of humanity, such as in a shocking discovery in 2013. Scientists and archaeologists discovered a new unknown species of humanity, a hominid that lived side by side with the ancestors of modern humans. The extinct species was discovered in Africa in the Rising Star Cave System, which was crucial in putting the site on the map as the starting point of human evolution into Homo sapiens. The team knew that by going deeper into the cave, they would rewrite history. The groundbreaking venture began when two amateur archaeologists, Stephen Tucker and Rick Hunter, decided to focus their attention on the most understudied part of the cave. Their risk paid off in a very secluded part of the cave where they found a chamber with a gate so narrow it was impossible for a man to squeeze through. But the journey had to be continued, and both Tucker and Hunter were shocked when they first saw inside the chamber a grave-like area littered with hundreds of bones. These bones looked primitive, the jaws were small, and definitely did not belong to a modern human. And it was then clear that professional anthropologists had to be brought in. According to one theory, this chamber was indeed the burial site of at least 15 people. But here's the mystery. Burying the dead in grave-type chambers is an exceptional feature of sapiens. So in all likelihood, these species were not exactly primitive. Their bone structure was drastically different from ours, but there were some striking similarities. Identical teeth, for example. This discovered species, called Homo naledi, is a hybrid of the species of primitive and modern man. This early species seemed civilized with respect to reverence for the dead. They buried them, unlike previous species that simply left the bodies to decompose, and some even feasted on the dead. Undoubtedly, this finding rewrites the history of human evolution. There is no doubt that the achievements and progress of early Egyptian civilizations can hardly be underestimated. Archaeological evidence shows that they had first-class urban development plans, a developed ritual business, and literally built the pyramids with their bare hands. Perhaps that is why there is a hypothesis that the Egyptians were assisted by aliens in the construction of one of the wonders of the world. While others believe that the civilization kept the technological power of its great inventions, such as the pyramids, a secret, historical evidence of these technologies has simply not reached us. The Egyptians appear to have been very protective of their know-how, and it seems that the temple of the goddess Hathor in Dendera, the temple itself doesn't look intriguing, but the inscriptions on its walls have caused much controversy. One inscription has a clear image of a priest standing on lotus flowers, in his hand a pole with a snake coiled around it, and the snake seems to be emitting rays of light. We can also see people surrounding the priest as if they are trying to follow the light or witness a miracle. Now, given the close intertwining of Egyptian mythology with religion, let's assume that these drawings could be a typical myth plot or story about a deity, right? But historians have the opposite opinion, believing that all the images of the priest and the snake are not a religious symbol, but an early reminder of the light bulb. The slithering snake is actually a filament or wire. The lotus is a kind of nest that gives life to the bulb, and the pole or tube surrounding the snake is actually an early version of a lamp. Historians have called this theory the Dendera light bulb, and although there is no archaeological evidence to confirm whether or not the Egyptians had electricity, the theory remains popular even today. An endless number of secrets lurk in the Egyptian pyramids, and many an archaeologist has pursued ambitious ventures to unravel some of them. Some have been destined to hit the jackpot, and many expeditions have ended in complete failure. Archaeological missions are our only source to learn more and more about the mighty Egyptian civilizations, and we now know enough about the antiquities of Africa to write books. But is it enough? In 2015, a Czech archaeological team stumbled upon the tomb of a previously unknown royal family, which revealed one eye-catching individual. The inscription on her tomb stated that the person was once the Queen of Egypt and the wife of the ruler. The tomb was discovered in the Old Kingdom necropolis, southwest of Cairo at Abu Sir, and it is safe to say that the queen existed during the Nefer dynasty. In all probability, she was the wife of a pharaoh of whom no information was previously available in the Egyptian archives. Nearly 1,200 years ago, on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea at the mouth of Egypt's Nile River, was a bustling city that was an important trading center. Merchants undertook adventurous journeys across the sea to source and sell their precious goods. Once one of the most important hubs of its civilization, the city was known for its riches, and its scenic views of the Nile were described by the Greek historian Herodotus. Descriptions also survive of the city's greatest temple, which was dedicated to the son of Zeus, Heracles, the mighty Greek hero. From the same epic writings, we learned that Helen of Troy and Paris visited the city at the mouth of the Nile before the Trojan War. The city was called Heracleion, but so far, archaeologists could find no evidence of the city's existence. Many thought it had simply been passed down in myths, from generation to generation. Perhaps the only source of information was Herodotus's mythological chronicles, which gave oral accounts of people visiting the city. It was thought that if the city existed, it might have been swallowed up by the Mediterranean Sea, but in the year 2000, that changed. Frank Gaudio, an underwater archaeologist, founded the European Institute for Underwater Research in 1987 in hopes of discovering sunken ancient cities. It wasn't until 1996 that Gaudio expanded his search to the Gulf of Abukir in Egypt to focus on the cities that once existed along the Nile River. 4 years later, he hit the jackpot after all. Deep in the bay, he found a well-preserved city. Frank and his team couldn't believe their eyes. How had no one stumbled upon the city before? Apparently because it was heavily covered in sediment, and when the team got rid of this particular obstacle, their discoveries were monumental. It seemed that the ocean had kept the city safe, especially for their team. Archaeologists found 64 shipwrecks and 700 anchors, gold coins, statues of pharaohs, sphinxes, walls with Egyptian and Greek inscriptions, and hundreds of statues of other Egyptian gods and goddesses. But the grandest find was a 5-meter statue of the god Hapi, patron saint of the Nile River. Carbon analysis of the granite showed that the statue dated back to the 4th century BC, so Frank knew he had to look deeper. His mission to find Heracleion continued, and in 2001 the team found a bust of Nectonius, the founding pharaoh of the last dynasty in Egypt. The inscriptions on the bust, as well as on other artifacts, also solved a great mystery for Frank Gaudio. Tonus and Heracleion are simply two different names for the same great trading city. Tonus is in the Egyptian reading a variant of the Greek name Heracles. It has also been speculated why the city disappeared underwater. Heracleion could not resist rising sea levels because of the region's soil structure. The process was slow but noticeable. At the same time, the flooding was probably catastrophic for the city and made it impossible to do anything about it. And the prosperous city sank, which sounds horrifying if you imagine its prosperous scope and grandeur. If you walk through the hills near the modern city of Machadodorp in the Mpumalanga province of South Africa, you will come across tangled stone walls, and if you find a good vantage point, you will see circular towers and corridors. Who would want to build such mazes along remote slopes and hilly terrain? Even if you try your best to explore the passages, remember it's too tricky. You can still find the entrance, but the exit is a problem. This archaeological wonder has left many questions. Historians argue with each other not only about the origin of the ruins, but also about their purpose. It is believed to have been a métier of habitation for the people in the 16th century. This mini-civilization lived largely off agriculture, and they had to use the land in very sophisticated ways to get a good harvest. Maybe they made changes to the landscape to reduce water loss? There's also a theory that they used the labyrinth as a cattle pen. Brilliant idea, isn't it? Building a fancy cattle palace to constantly have a chance of getting lost in it yourself. There is another option, that it is a small part of a lost city that once stood in the same place, but now lies underground, or a natural disaster has turned it into ruins. There is also a scientific hypothesis that the stone circles emit electromagnetic waves and sounds at certain frequencies, and these walls were once part of a Pan-African energy system designed for resonant sound gold mining. Nevertheless, its purpose is unknown to us, but for some reason it is called the Place of Happiness. If you ever have the chance to go to the west-central part of Mauritania, you should definitely see the Eye of the Sahara. At first glance, this place is really striking with its geometrically precise circles of enormous size. It seems incredible that such a complex pattern itself appeared in the middle of the Sahara Desert out of nowhere. Since the population in the area is sparse and the climate is harsh, you won't find locals near the mysterious circles. This region remained virtually unexplored until the early 60s. Scientists took an interest in it for a very special reason. This eye, or so-called tectonic structure of Richat, is so colossal that it can be seen from space, You heard me right. Regardless of its origin, this remarkable object was useful to the astronauts of the Gemini spacecraft for navigation purposes. For them, the Eye of the Sahara became the central marker of their distance from the Earth. Given the limited technology of its time, it is clear that the reshot structure as a geologic formation was very useful. But its popularity has also given rise to many theories. One of them suggests that the circular pattern of the Oka is actually a meteor strike that happened in the prehistoric days of the Earth. A galvanizing meteor struck the desert and left an interesting pattern on the surface, not to mention the rocks found in the geologic dome. In fact, the sediments and minerals found in the rocks are quite common on our planet, meaning they are of Earth origin, and so far, no meteor debris or remains have been found in the vicinity of the eye. It has also been speculated that this impact could have somehow contributed to the appearance of new life forms here, but this hypothesis has not been developed. Probably the main thing that helps to understand the structure of Reshot is how complex certain geological processes that began or occurred millions of years ago. Scientists have settled on the opinion that the Eye of the Sahara is a natural change in the landscape, and nothing more. Africa's Lake Natron resembles Medusa Gorgon from Greek mythology. Whoever dared and looked into her eyes would turn to stone. Now we know that Medusa is a monster from an epic and doesn't exist in real life, but what if we told you that a mysterious and scary lake in Tanzania can turn anyone and anything into stone? We'd like to exaggerate, but there's nothing to exaggerate. No one dives into Lake Natron. This place is the cradle of death, and for many years locals have had a belief that the lake is deadly. Whoever drinks from it will eventually turn to stone. Throughout the recorded history of Lake Natron, locals have seen dead birds and animals turn ashy gray after taking a sip from the lake. There are many birds and animals frozen in place on its surface, as if they were living sculptures. But upon closer inspection, you would realize that all are dead and their bodies are slowly decomposing. And how many hundreds of dead animals the horrible lake has hidden at its bottom over the centuries. This lake was one of the best-kept secrets of the African continent, and because the surrounding area is not touristy, the world knew little about the world's scariest lake. Lying in the Horn of Africa within Ethiopia, the Danakil Depression is arguably the most dangerous place on the continent. But first things first, the Danakil Desert is very remote, unexplored, uninhabitable, and deadly to humans as the hottest and driest region of the Earth. But that is not the only reason why it is not recommended for human feet to set foot here. This place is deadly not because of the climate. This small region on an East African tectonic fault is actually a poisonous cauldron. Its ponds boil with acid, and you can suffocate from the chlorine and sulfur particles in the air. However, if you look at the pools from above, they are breathtakingly beautiful. This whole area is full of vibrant colors. The red, orange-yellow landscape of Danakil and the acrid yellowish-green color of the bubbling cauldron-like water is a sight that will actually make you strangely fascinated, like any unnatural and dangerous beauty. Scientists believe that this is the only region on the planet that actively kills everything and everyone in its territory. When a team of scientists examined the pools, they discovered that the pH of the lake is 0. This water is like pure acid. Even a small sip of lake water can be deadly to anyone. You'll see thousands of dead or dying insects around the reservoir, and it's not because of the acidic water. The region itself has elevated levels of poisonous carbon dioxide. If you go within 30 centimeters, you'll inhale too much CO2 and die within minutes, like a fire. So it's no wonder why the locals have given the pools an apt nickname, Killer Lake. There are also many small and active volcanoes, plus acid lakes and clouds of poisonous gas. So any step on the grounds of this Ethiopian attraction could be your last. If you like these stories, put a like under the video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss such interesting content.